Neptun, ancient god of the seas. Neptun, a fitting symbol for a Swedish marine transport and service company. And Neptun is well equipped to meet the challenge of the sea, a company providing outstanding capacity and services in the areas of marine transport, lifting, and salvage. From a proud past of unique salvage accomplishments, Neptun has become a leading marine transport and service company for the offshore industry. The fleet has gradually been extended and specialized to provide every conceivable marine service, and an experienced engineering staff vouch for the careful planning of each operation. When people here talk about marine transport, they usually think of cargo and passenger ships plying the seven seas. But to Neptun, transport means much more. A complete system of tugs, barges, carrier vessels, cranes, and engineering work meeting nearly every ocean transport need. Here are a few examples. Neptun's bulk carriers, Hera and Juno, are fully equipped for most bulk cargoes. Their recent successful use for discharging coal outside shallow ports has received worldwide attention. Neptun's two 7,000 horsepower ocean-going tugs, the Neptun and the Poseidon, provide real power whenever it's needed in any kind of weather. For transport of exceptionally large and heavy constructions, Neptun has a number of flat-top barges. The biggest one, Goliath 10, has a dead weight of over 20,000 tons. Thanks to a sophisticated ballast system, Neptun barges have both roll-on, roll-off and float-on, float-off capacity. They can take on almost any transport job you can name. For example, they are used for the transport of cranes, trusses, jackets, jack-up rigs, or as here, the Northeast Frigg Column, the Statfjord B deck. Here, the integrated superstructure for the offshore platform was lifted and transferred 36 nautical miles in narrow Norwegian fjords, the heaviest object ever to be transported by water, almost 40,000 tons. Neptun's innovative approach saved vast amounts of time and money. To perform this operation, Neptun used 4 Goliath barges, 2 piggyback mounted and 1 on each side. This trimaran method will be applied again for the even heavier Statfjord C deck. The same joint venture, Neptun and Norwegian contractors, has been awarded the contract for this operation too. Another innovative technical solution was worked out by Neptun when they solved the seemingly impossible task of lifting an entire floating dock, more than 300 meters long and weighing 36,000 tons. The dock had sustained severe bottom damages and had to be lifted out of the water for repairs. After meticulous stability calculations and planning, the lift was carried out using 4 Goliath barges, which could be totally submerged. Every phase of the operation was controlled by an online computer, and by following the operational flow chart, no step could be initiated until all previous steps had been checked. The operation was a feat of extreme lifting power combined with skilled engineering that was and still is hard to beat. Untold millions were saved as a consequence. Yes, lifting is a Neptun specialty. The Goliath barges manage exceptional weight. But when both height and weight are required, Neptun Hebe cranes are the answer. Hebe 1, built in 1968, was considered a giant floating crane at that time, able to lift 400 tons or 100 tons to a height of 70 meters. But Neptun foresaw the needs of the future, which included the world's largest shear-leg crane, Hebe-2. The company now owns 2 of them, and they are not idle. Uprighting a sunken dredger in the Suez Canal, wreck clearing in Port of Spain, Trinidad, removing a wrecked bridge in Sweden, raising a sunken vessel in the Panama Canal, assisting in the lifting of a floating dock in Norway, lifting during the construction of the Thames Barrier in London. And in the offshore industry, which, by the way, is one of the fastest growing sectors in Neptun's operations, high lifting saves both time and money. Everywhere, and no wonder. They each have a lifting capacity of 1,600 tons and a maximum lifting height of 170 meters. Each crane is able to lift 335 tons to a height of 147 meters at an outreach of 50 meters. The big Hebe cranes can be equipped with 800 or 1,200 ton hooks. Or with 600-ton grabs to cover the full range of lifting needs. Salvage has been Neptun's specialty since the very beginning. And in the salvage business, it is not only tugs, barges, and cranes that get the job done. Without skilled divers, there wouldn't be any salvage work. Neptun and its sister company, Rödebolaget, have a well-trained team of divers who operate all over the world. A salvage job where both Neptun and Rödebolaget were involved was the refloating of a passenger ship, the Navarino, which had capsized in the floating dock in Scaramanga, Greece. The Navarino was resting heavily against the dock wall, and the list of both dock and ship was between 30 and 11 degrees. The Navarino was salvaged, and thanks to innovative engineering and the combined forces of Rödebolaget and Neptun, the work became a resounding success. Neptun has performed many historic salvage operations throughout the years, but perhaps the most famous was the raising of the warship Vasa between the years 1959 and 61. The ship had lain at the bottom of the Stockholm harbor since 1628. More recently, Neptun's salvage work has included such jobs as the raising of the Quidnet, sunk in the Panama Canal and hindering traffic, a job that took Neptun only 9 days instead of the 180 days which the Panama Canal Company had figured. Faster, higher, heavier. With every new job, Neptun demonstrates its outstanding engineering know-how and ability to develop new approaches whenever needed. Yes, Neptune's trident symbolizes the three main areas in which Neptune is specialized: transport, lifting, and salvage. And the foundation for the company's extensive service is the know-how of expert engineers coupled with the skill of Neptune's experienced operators.
Neptun Transport and Marine Service presents a report on the first phase of their work in the harbour of Port of Spain, Trinidad. Trinidad and Tobago, lying in the southern part of the West Indies, is a thriving country. Trinidad has had a colourful history. It is said that Columbus made his first landfall here when making his famous voyage of discovery. In the past, these two islands have been owned in turn by the Spanish, the French, and the British. However, in 1962, Trinidad and Tobago became a fully independent country. With a population of 1.2 million, and like all modern countries, it is conscious of the need to expand its economy and make full use of its natural assets. Trinidad is rapidly developing its resources. It is a traditional holiday and tourist centre with its magnificent scenery and beautiful beaches. Many people return here year after year. The conditions for scuba diving, sport fishing and underwater photography could not be better. Beneath the surface lies a world of calm and beauty. Trinidad's asphalt lake is also known worldwide. Among its other industries which are important are agriculture for the sugarcane, dairy products, cocoa and coffee, and there are also cement factories, a fertilizer plant, and bauxite refining. Not quite so well known is Trinidad's status in the West Indies as a country with a strong oil-based economy. The government is naturally keen to invest the revenue from their oil in projects which will provide long-term benefits. The development of good and safe port facilities have become a major priority. Recently, the government had built in Holland a new suction dredger to service their main harbour, Port of Spain. Improvements to quays and craneage there have also been carried out. A major stumbling block in their development of Port of Spain has been a number of wrecks and half-sunken ships lying in the harbour and its approaches. Not only do they hinder the expansion of the port, but they are also a considerable hazard to ships now using Port of Spain. A number of the wrecks have been lying there for some time. Some of these hazards are not so apparent. After carrying out detailed investigations, the Trinidad government, through the auspices of the Swedish government, contracted Neptun Transport and Marine Service of Stockholm to remove 21 wrecks from the area of Port of Spain. Neptun Transport and Marine Service are a well-known salvage company operating in many parts of the world. For an operation of this size, the detailed planning is considerable, and Neptun drew upon many of its resources. A log carrier the Hera was brought from Stockholm. First, it was comprehensively equipped to act as an operational centre and fitted with diving equipment, workshops, living accommodation, and storage and maintenance facilities. Whilst this was going on, other equipment was also being prepared and mobilised. The Hera, together with one of Neptune's salvage cranes, the 400-ton capacity Hebe-1, were towed in heavy winter weather down to Cadiz in Spain, which was to be the assembly point for all the equipment for the final mobilisation to Trinidad. Two small tugs, a special grab designed for wreck removal, and one of Neptune's large submersible barges were also brought to Cadiz from Jeddah in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. At Cadiz, the crane Hebe-1 was loaded onto Neptune's barge Goliath 3 for the voyage to Trinidad. This in itself is a complex operation requiring careful preparations and calculations. Once in position over the barge, Goliath 3 is deballasted and the crane is secured to the deck for the sea passage. The crane, the two tugs and the grab were all welded to the barge. When all the preparations were completed, the Neptun Suecia connected up to the towing bridles of the Hera and the Goliath 3 for the towage to Port of Spain. The Neptun Suecia, together with her sister ship, the Neptun Gothia, are two of the world's most powerful tugs. Each has 4 engines, giving a total of 23,000 horsepower. They are fitted with the latest and most sophisticated equipment available, and are well suited to tackling such jobs as this tandem tow across the Atlantic. After completion of their 24-day and 3,500-mile tow, the convoy arrived in Port of Spain. Work began immediately to offload the equipment to start removal operations. The Hera began operations at the wreck of the 7,500-ton cargo ship Jurua, which was lying in the harbour approaches. Divers went down to examine the wreck and used television cameras, when visibility permitted, to assist them and those on the surface in deciding what equipment should be used and where it should be placed. Those on the surface rely greatly on the skills of the diver and the information he collects. Close cooperation between the divers and the operators on the salvage craft is essential for a safe and successful operation. Here we can see the propeller from the Jurua. Because of the size of the ship, the largest Neptun had to remove in Port of Spain, it was necessary to cut it into a number of pieces. In different places on the Jurua, Neptun used all the techniques for underwater cutting, including using torches, chains, and underwater-shaped explosive charges. Not only does the hull have to be cut, but also the internal works as well. When working inside wrecks, the divers can be exposed to unknown hazards. During the period of their operations in Port of Spain, Neptun also undertook to train the Coast Guard divers in some of the techniques of salvage diving. Diving on salvage work is very much more hazardous and demanding than diving for sport. In the meantime, the crane Hebe-1 is working in another part of the port on another wreck. These chains are used to cut a wreck into pieces, which can then be lifted by the Hebe-1. Obviously, if a wreck can be removed in one piece, it is very much quicker and cheaper to do so. Where this is not possible, and this may be due to a wreck's size or the damage it has suffered, a variety of techniques can be employed to reduce it to sections with manageable weights. When a ship has been submerged for a long period of time, the steel is greatly weakened, and then it can be possible to cut it through using heavy chains. These chains are attached to the lifting hooks of Hebe-1. The effects of these chains can be clearly seen. This method is very much quicker than using cutting gear or explosives. Once a wreck is in pieces, which can be lifted by the Hebe-1, the next job is to start passing small messenger wires under the piece, which can then be used to pull through the heavy lifting wires. Whilst part of this work can be done using the winches on the crane, much still has to be done by the crew themselves. Neptun were assisted in their operations in Port of Spain by a number of local crewmen. When the wires are finally in position, the lifting can then start. Even now, things could go wrong. A wire can break, or a piece can slip out of the wires as it comes off the bottom. Fortunately, this has not happened here, and the next step can proceed. The piece is now manoeuvred over the top of Neptun's barge Goliad 3, which has been ballasted down in readiness. Once it is on the barge, it can then be taken to the dumping area, which is about 12 miles from Port of Spain. The sunken tug St. George is somewhat easier. Lying close into the quays and in shallow water, it has been a major obstruction. However, As it only has a weight of 100 tons, it can be raised in one piece. Once lifted, the crew place hoses on board to pump out the water. Pumps from the Hebe-1 are also placed on board. The tug has to be pumped out as it is to be carried in the slings of the crane from the position where it lay to the dumping area. The Hebe-1 is towed stern first by one of the small tugs, with the St. George suspended in the slings. At the dumping area, Neptun sink it in 150 meters of water, where it will no longer be a hazard. The St. George is probably the easiest of the wrecks that Neptun lifted here. The work of getting the lifting wires under a wreck can be a slow and laborious business, even for skilled salvage men. The chain is being hauled out by the Hassan from the Hebe-1. Between the tug and the crane, they are going to try and saw the chain round the end of the wreck, and by pulling backwards and forwards, work the chain underneath the main body of the wreck. When this cannot be done, it is necessary to tunnel underneath, a much slower business. When successful, and the chain in position, the next job is to place the lifting wires. The tug disconnects its end of the chain, and the crewmen haul it back on top of the wreck. At the crane end, the lifting wires are attached to the chain. One of the 5-ton auxiliary hooks of Hebe-1 then pulls the chain out from under the wreck and pulls the lifting wires in position underneath. These are then hooked onto the main lifting gear of Hebe-1. Here we see one of the 200-ton hooks. Lifting can then start. Things do not always go to plan. This ship has become so weak that the wires are cutting right into and through the hull. At this point, the master of Hebe-1 decided that the wreck could not be lifted in one piece. He will therefore carry on lifting and cut it right through, so that it can then be removed in two pieces. In doing this, there is always the risk that the wires may be cut in two themselves. All the work of getting the wires underneath the wreck has to be done again, before finally it can be removed and taken to the dumping area. Both these pieces were landed on the barge Goliath 3. Of course, whilst a number of the wrecks could be cleared fairly quickly and comparatively easily, either complete like the tug St. George, or in large sections like the Jurua. Many were too old or too badly damaged to be removed in this way. Neptun used one of the grabs which they have had specially built for this work. This was fitted to the Hebe-1. The grab itself weighs 100 tons, and it has a lifting capacity of 300 tons. When the grab picks up part of a wreck, it is then landed on the barge Goliath 3, which has been fitted with a reinforced concrete deck, specially for this type of work. A tractor unit is used for stacking the pieces on the barge. When the barge is full, it will be taken to a dumping area for discharging. Grabbing is a slow business. One operation takes up to 30 minutes, and sometimes the grab will come up without anything in it at all. At other times, the wreckage disintegrates before it can be landed on the barge. In spite of this, it is still the quickest and most efficient way of clearing this type of wreckage. Sometimes it is possible to pick up in the grab quite large pieces and even complete ships. This does not often occur. Usually, the grab has to take a ship apart, piece by piece. The jaw width of this grab, when open, is over 9 meters. Neptun also have a 600-ton grab for use with one of their 1,600-ton salvage cranes. The closing force of the jaws is extremely high, and the teeth bite into the steelwork as if it were paper thin. When picking pieces up from the bottom, they are quite often full of mud and water, adding to the weight and the difficulty of the problem. As none of the wrecks had any salvable value, they were all disposed of in the dumping area under the supervision of the Trinidad Coast Guards. Here we see the end of the ship Goodwill. Some of the larger pieces had to be lifted off the barge using the grab. After completing the removal of the 21 wrecks in August, discussions were held between Neptun and the Trinidad government regarding a number of other known hazards. In November, it was agreed that Neptun should carry out a detailed survey of the port area. A survey of this nature requires great accuracy in plotting the position of the survey craft. Neptun used a Decca transponder system, where there are fixed shore transmitters with a mobile receiver installed on the survey boat, which in this instance was one of Neptune's small tugs. The digital readout shows the distance in meters from the fixed shore transmitters. This system can ensure an accuracy of positioning within half a meter. The survey was in two parts. One part would cover objects jutting above the mud bottom using side-scan sonar equipment, and the other part of the survey would penetrate the mud in the areas of the channels and the inner and outer harbours to seek out any hidden objects which could cause damage to dredgers working in the port. The fish, suspended from the front of the tug, sends out sonic impulses which are reflected from solid objects. Above the bottom impulses are sent out either side of the fish to pick up obstructions projecting above the bottom. A narrow beam of impulses can be projected downwards from the fish to locate objects hidden in the mud. The detailed survey went right up to the keys in many places. As the tug crossed and recrossed the harbour, the position of the tug and the survey of the bottom were plotted on parallel systems. As each object appeared on the plot, it was examined and discussed as to what it might be. Whenever possible, a diver was sent down to investigate. Some of the objects were very close to the surface. On his return, the diver would sketch out what he had discovered, and this would then be compared with the tracing on the plot. The details of each object were plotted on a chart which Neptun compiled. In this way, more than 60 wrecks of varying sizes were plotted, and 130 objects which were potential hazards were located. In carrying out the survey within the harbour of Port of Spain, the survey boat travelled almost 1,200 miles. Neptun had been pleased to be of service to the Trinidad government in clearing some of the hazards and charting others.